look into your pet's eyes, what do you see? A reflection of yourself? A glimpse into a world untamed by human expectations? Or perhaps just a creature sharing the same space, navigating this chaotic world alongside you? Welcome to the Companions Collective, where we dig into the human-animal bond and uncover the messy, beautiful reality of it all. I'm Angela Schneider, your guide through the depths of our shared connection with our companion animals. Join me as we explore the tangled web of love, loss, and everything in between that defines our relationships with the creatures who know us best. Diana Lundin's journey from journalist to dog photographer has been a winding one, filled with challenges and personal growth. Now she's bringing her life full circle, joining journalism and dog photography together to shine a spotlight on the way climate change is affecting our animal species and our planet. She leaped at a recent volunteer opportunity that took her on an adventurous cross-country road trip to relocate animals for a farm sanctuary. The 3,600-mile journey was not without its obstacles, as the team navigated weather challenges, vehicle issues, and a rather hungry llama. She documented the trip while driving the bus and caring for the animals, and she intends to use the experience and her storytelling skills to bring light to the important conversation surrounding the impacts of climate change. We're here today with Diana Lundin, one of my photographer friends from down in California. Diana, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I am a photographer in Los Angeles. I specialize in dogs and cats. I'm evolving my business so that um, I like to do a kind of a, I wouldn't say flashier, but I like to do something that's a little out of the ordinary. And one of the things that I like to do with dogs and cats is to make sort of more cinematic portraits, whether it's in a studio or whether it's in uh, or some sort of scene that I've conjured up. I like to do something different and have a cinematic feel to it, more so than a dog in nature or a dog on a bed, which I used to do, when I was a kid photographer 10 years ago, but now I like to get just looking for a different vibe there.
You describe yourself as an ex-journalist. Tell us about your journey through journalism, how that impacted you and how it ended up transitioning you into a dog photographer.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. When I was 14, I became very interested in journalism. I had this neighbor who she was an army colonel, and she would come home, to her parents' house. They next door, and she'd come home after, being in Germany or wherever she was stationed, and she would always have these tales to tell. And so I had this current affairs teacher who said, do an interview on an interesting person. And so I set up this interview and I painted the scene and I did this thing. And my teacher said, A plus plus plus, now you're writing. And I'm like, oh, this feels good. I can do this. So I started really getting into journalism and then yearbook and the newspaper and all that in high school. And then I also got into the darkroom and photography in high school as well. So when I went to college, I got a Bachelor of Journalism and with a photojournalism emphasis. And so I went off to do that for a while in small newspapers where I could do both of them. And then as I progressed more, it was like one or the other. And I was really afraid of flash photography, of all things. I was really afraid of studio lighting and flash. I think as most beginners are really afraid, like continuous light, oh yeah, we can see that. Natural light, yeah, we can see that. But studio, you're not seeing it in that moment. But that was in film days too, right? So you weren't getting any kind of feedback until you got the roll of film back. So okay, I guess I'm just going to be the writer then. I'm just going to drop the photography. And so that happened. I dropped the photography and I slowly got back. I ended my newspaper career after 15 years. I went into television production and I went into public relations and I went into other lines and I sucked at all of them. Like I'm almost unemployable. I was so bad at all of these things. And then I became a website editor and I'm freaking making money. I'm like, whoa, I don't have to take a vow of poverty anymore. And I'm like taking classes and I'm buying a digital camera and I'm doing all this stuff. Like, and so I got back into photography
Oh my
and
God. I
I
feel like
ended
you're
up,
describing my life. Oh my God.
I'm like, okay, I'm making the money. And then I get laid off, but it was 11 years. Okay. And
Yeah.
I'm making money like for like three people. It was time to lay me off. It was a long time. I had
Mhm.
survived so many layoffs and it was time. And I was like, okay, this is fine. This is fine. I don't mind this. And so that was the last time I was employed was in 2011 by, a real entity. And it took a year. I started doing video production, but I was doing it with my partner and she hated it. Like I was like, okay, you do the sound. I'll teach you how to do the sound. I'll do everything else. You just have to do the sound. And man, it was a disaster. It was like she hated it so much. So then I go, well, what do you really like to do? What do you like? I tried food photography. I tried newborns, and I really just
Oh
like
God,
newborns.
no.
Like
Diana,
5 out of 5
crazy.
peeing and pooping, and I'm like, I photographed probably 3,000 dogs now, and I can almost count on two hands the amount of pee and poop I've had to deal with. Very little percentage wise, dogs win every time. So I did not like the newborns. I don't like kids in general. Um, and so it's like wedding. No, I don't want to do wedding photography. That's why I started video, is because it has a high ticket value that weddings have, but you don't have to shoot the wedding. You can
Mm.
just do corporate, little business, small business videos. And I really enjoy doing that, except I couldn't do it by myself. It proved to be too much. So I got into pet photography by Arica Dorff. You know Arica?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, familiar with the name.
So I watched her Creative Live tryout. I
Mm.
was really back into Creative Live back in those days,
Oh, a long
and
time ago.
I watched her tryout. She didn't even have a master class. She didn't have anything. She was trying out, and I watched it, and I go, oh, and I love animals, and
Hmm.
I can do that. And so I just started practicing, you know, in the neighborhood, and then started, putting out my shingle, and that's what I did. And and now, long story longer, I'm putting the journalism and the photography back
Hmm.
together again. I'm weaving them back together. I started doing this um, a few months ago. I started writing blog posts that were more telling a story rather than the way I had been doing it. It's like I wouldn't even blog anymore because I don't like blogging. Like, had a really fun session with so and so, and like I didn't want to do that anymore.
Right.
So I started telling stories to go with the photography I had done, and I go, yeah, I like that. I want to go back to that, and so that's how I started doing these things together, and that's what led on this journey that I just finished. I went from Oregon to Maine. I was one of we had two converted school buses. I was one of three drivers. Each bus had three drivers, and we were carrying farm sanctuary farm sanctuary animals from their sanctuary in Oregon to their new sanctuary in Maine. And why the new sanctuary? Because their pasture in Oregon, their land in Oregon, had become unsustainable for a farm sanctuary. They were surrounded by wildfires there was smoke in their valley all the time. The water had dried up. They were in a perpetual drought. So they either had to irrigate their land more, and they had to buy additional hay. So it just became a very expensive proposition to have a farm sanctuary. So they they bought a property from 10 acres to 130 acres in Maine. It's very close to the Canadian border. And so then they needed to move these animals. And this was my ex-business coach so that's how I knew of this, hey, volunteer to drive farm sanctuary animals across country. And I'm like, oh yes, please. Yes, I'll do that. And that's how I ended up on the trip. And so, as I said, we just got back, and it was funny. She considers them climate refugees, and I see that. And she says, well, we're privileged because we can move. But just the fact that we moved across country, there's no blueprint for that. Who does that? Nobody does that. Nobody. I think that this 3,600-mile trip across country was something that just hasn't been done. It's just that extraordinary. And their big picture, they've been planning for 3 years this move, and they've been working on the move for 3 years. And so they were being chased out by the weather from Oregon, the climate, really. And as we're crossing the country, we too are being chased by the weather.
Yeah.
We are really on the lookout for the heat dome, because that was the week that we started. The first week of June was when the heat dome was building up over Northern California, and it was coming into the Pacific Northwest. So right there, you don't want to have 2 busfuls of critters with a heat dome.
Right.
Because what are you going to do? That's bad. That's not a good situation. So we're like, we have to get on the road before this thing comes and envelops us. And simultaneously, we finally crossed the Intermountain West. It's tough for us to get from, you have no idea, when you're doing it like this, you really see the scenery. So we're going from Oregon to we're just trying to dodge the weather that is developing in the Midwest.
Oh yeah,
and
it's
we
tornado
reroute
season.
ourselves. Yeah, it's tornado season and it's flooding. Okay.
Oh.
So we originally were going to go through Chicago, and we were kind of scared to go through Chicago anyway because of just driving 2 school buses full of animals. Yeah, so we were but there was supposed to be a lot of weather over there. So we diverted ourselves and we stayed north of the weather. We still hit some things. We broke down. We did everything that you're supposed to do to have a really interesting adventure. We did, including breaking down in Nebraska, which is that's the center of the country. And it was really quite an adventure. I was on the bird bus, and we had 110 birds on that bus. So there were only 2 rows of seats. We had one wall was caged, and most of the land birds were in those cages. There were some ducks, water. We had ducks, guinea hens, chickens, turkeys in the cages, and then roaming free were the geese and the swan, and because they can't go in cages, so they were running free. So I was with the 2 men, Scott and Greg, and driving the bus, and they actually stayed on the bus at night. We would stay at pretty low budget hotels, motels, the kind where you get the waffle in the morning, which I can talk more about that, because if you're with a farm sanctuary, you're going to be with vegans. Okay. So it was a vegan trip, and it was supposed to be vegan 100% of the time. And so I'm not vegan. And there's one other person who on the trip who wasn't vegan. we also had a vegan extremist. And it's not me saying that she was a vegan extremist. She actually has a sticker that says vegan extremist. So it's like, I have the evidence, I got the receipt. She's the one who's calling herself that. I'm like, and it was like a TED talk all the time on veganism. And it's like, I don't mind being vegan for this week. I don't mind doing these things. But when I get the lecture series, that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult for me. I didn't rebel. I didn't rebel. No, I did rebel. There was a couple times that I went I didn't do the waffles in the motel, but I did a bagel with cream cheese, and I literally hid so that I could eat it because I didn't want to offend. I wanted, go along. And I'm not a big meat eater anyway. I would say I'm like 95% vegetarian anyway, but vegetarian, not vegan.
Right.
There is a difference. So
Because cheese.
actually on the last day was we were going to the airport. One of the people had a friend. We ended up Medilimps. It's really hard for me to say this word. Medilimps, Maine. Okay, that's where their new property was.
Okay.
And on the last day, they rented a lake cabin, because the house wasn't ready to be occupied yet. The water wasn't on. There's a lot of things that still needed to be done with them on site, but not, so we had this cabin, and it's this lakeside, and you can hear the loons and the sunset, and it's bucolic. There's lady slippers, and it's just gorgeous out there. And so we get to soothe ourselves in like the final bit. So one of the women, who's the sister of my business coach, her name is Susan, the sister, it turns out, she was not a vegan either. And her friends picked her up from, they lived in Bangor, and Bangor is about 2 hours away from Medilimps. And so I caught a ride with them because my plane left from Bangor. And instead of going on the stinky school bus, it's like, yeah, go in a Mini Cooper. Okay, I'm going to do that. So the people, her friends, say, where do you want to go to lunch? And we're hungry, because we were hungry on the whole trip. And we went to a lobster place to get lobster rolls. And I'm telling you, we ate them like we were feral. It's like, just to get, I don't know, the protein. I felt really bad about it, but we were like both of us are like, argh.
Did you ever have any
Gorgeous.
time on this trip when you stopped and said to yourself, I'm a dog photographer. What the hell am I doing here?
No, but there were a few moments I did question my sanity for doing it. But it was more like, okay, so I was on the bird bus. The bird bus, and the other bus was the mammal bus. And we didn't really talk about the mammal bus. It was like Fight Club, the first rule of Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club. The first rule of the mammal bus is you don't talk about the mammal bus. And the reason why is because they didn't have this one specific permit that they didn't need in Oregon, but that you couldn't get because there's no rule about moving a sanctuary interstate. Okay. So sanctuary animals, they do not need an individual permit when they are being moved to their own sanctuary. They're not stopping anywhere. They're not they're not mingling with anybody else's herds or whatever. They're not mingling, right? So one from another, but we're also taking it interstate, and they're still not mingling one with the other, right? It's still going to go from one sanctuary to the next sanctuary without mingling with any other farm animals along the way. So they didn't have these individual permits. Probably shouldn't even be talking about this, but they didn't have these little individual permits. So that's why we weren't talking about it. They had all the other permits.
Yeah.
They had permits. It was permitted. But here's what was funny. The llama ate the permit from the back of the bus. It was there's this permit, and they actually got stopped. The mammal bus got stopped because they didn't have the permit. It's a couple of days when we first noticed that the permit was missing, I made a post on Instagram and said, "But officer, the llama ate my permit." But that's what happened. That's what ended up happening. That they got stopped because they didn't have this permit on the bus. So it wasn't that, the individual ones. It was just the blanket permit for them to go. And then it turns out um, I'm 7.8 miles from Medilimps. I'm driving the bus. It's the last stretch, 7.8 miles from our destination, and I get stopped. And it's because we also had a permit. Somebody also ate a permit on our bus, and we didn't have a license for the trailer, but it's because they couldn't get one in Oregon because it was so specific about, or they didn't need one in Oregon, so they didn't have to have one. So if you don't have one, if you don't have to have one, you don't have one. But in Maine, you need one.
Yes.
So that was, we would run into little obstacles like that. So 7.8 miles away, I get stopped. That was the only time that we were stopped. And then I think it was the only time they were stopped for their not having a permit. I just thought it was funny.
So you've questioned your sanity a few times. It seems
oh,
kind of like
mostly the smell and the sound.
without
There was
question.
I brought camera equipment. I go, I'm really documenting. I knew my number one priority was the animals and to drive the bus.
Yeah.
That's job one. Anything else I do after that is like fine, but it's not job one. So I go, but I brought my camera, I brought 2 extra lenses, I brought a flash, I brought one little softbox, and I have the smallest bag on earth, right? But I'm putting those in. So I didn't put an extra pair of shoes in. And I never took the camera equipment out, I documented the whole thing on an iPhone because,
wow,
just because I felt I had to.
mm-hmm.
And I didn't have the extra shoes. I was like, oh, on the 4th day, I'm looking at those shoes and I'm going, not today, Satan. I'm not putting those on. And then Satan's going, yeah, you are. You're putting those on again today. And so I put on those damn shoes. They smell so bad. They look so bad. And fortunately, that night I got to wash them. So at least it was so bad. And I never used the camera equipment, which is very funny.
That is funny because your intention of going was to document everything, and you did that with your iPhone. You I think very much like me, you have the soul of a journalist, and we don't think that it was a career for us. It was something we were born into. It's something that we will always be, right? So now what is your intention to do with everything that you documented on this trip as journalist, dog photographer?
Yeah, so yeah, that's the interesting part. I think that initially just the story of a 3,600-mile journey, climate refugees, farm sanctuary animals, it is a very compelling story in and of itself. And jack up the spicy bits, breakdowns, like alarms going off, llamas eating permits, whatever. It's an interesting story. I don't know how long. It's probably not a super long article, not a super short one, but not a super long one either. So I think that there's that layer of it. And initially when I went, I also thought that there would be a stronger photography component and maybe more of a documentary one. But the truth was that it was not my job to be a documentary photographer. Otherwise, I would have handled it very much differently. It was my job to drive the bus and to take care of the animals. And so that was more important to me than strangely, it was more important for me to get that one done. And really, the filth on the bus would not be something that you would want to bring your equipment out on and leave it out. And because it was really dirty in there. And so I ended up not really using the camera equipment, but I documented it very heavily on the iPhone. So I have a lot of video and I have a lot of stills. They're iPhone quality, and for better or worse, that is what I have. But after I get something launched out, um, that initial part, I feel like there's a book in this whole thing, and the book, I had a very parallel sort of journey when I was 16, going from Washington, Oregon to Virginia, and driving a sag wagon for a couple who were riding their bicycles across country. And so I want to take those two journeys and weave those, because it's a very internal journey, and it's journeys, and it's very external as well. So, and then I have this contemporary story of the climate change and the farm animals. So I think that, so if I do this right, I can meld these elements together, and I feel like that there's a book in that can be very potent. And hopefully I can write that. Hopefully I can. I have one book. It's a photography book of dogs eating ice cream. So it's not like but I have a lot of writing experience. And I think I was led to start doing those blog stories and the blog posts that were weaving more journalism in almost to show that I can do this kind of work. And then this whole journey falls into my lap, and it's like, yeah, you can do this. And now if you have to show anybody, you can just show them these articles that you've written, how you've put it together with the words and the words in the photos. And then you can do that. I just feel like whatever I did was in preparation for something bigger. And I intend to, go big. I intend to go big, which is like so ironic. I told you that the woman who owns the sanctuary with her husband, she was my business coach. And the first place I ever met her 5 or 6 years ago was at a program called Play Big. And so she's also given me the vehicle to play big years later. And I feel like, don't mess that up. Don't mess that up. Use that. That's going to be extraordinary. That's like, look at the gift she just gave you. It's a gift, this trip to me. And it was like, I didn't have to pay. Like they paid my flight expenses, meal and hotels and stuff. So I wasn't even covering that out of my own pocket. I just got to go and help and experience it and come back with something very valuable, I feel.
The overarching message of the trip is that we're in trouble with climate, right?
Yeah.
It is changing the way we live and do things. I fear it's going to change the number of species we have on the planet, whether it's animal, flora, and fauna. I look at, I'm a wildflower nerd, and I was out counting wildflowers on a walk with Bella yesterday, and I look at beautiful these beautiful blossoms that Mother Nature has given us, and I wonder if intense heat, wildfires, drought is going to erase some of these beautiful things from our planet.
I think it is. And it was funny because when I was driving that school bus, or even just looking around, I would think to myself, it's a beautiful country. It's a shame if you lose it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that was really how I was feeling on this trip, that all this beauty can be so easily lost, and we are in the process of losing it. And I don't know, I don't know if it's reversible, but I just feel like we are on the precipice. And, it's funny because I'm 64 now. I like to call it level 64, but I remember maybe even probably during the beginning of the pandemic that I was thinking to myself, I'm so glad I'm old. I'm not going to have to live through the worst of this. And now I'm thinking, I'm thinking, how can I help? What can I do? And it's like this trip for me was something that I can do.
Mm.
And it's in my wheelhouse. Um, I don't know what impact I can make, but I feel at least by doing it, I'm even if it's a very small audience, maybe I can be impactful in some ways. And I'm not an extremist. So I feel like, I'm not giving that talk that you just want somebody to shut up. I'm like, I hope that I can write it in such a compelling way that it attracts people to it and that they can get something from it that way. I like to attract rather than to, hit people over the head. Although I'll hit people over the head as well.
Because we talk about climate change on a very global scale, right? And we talk about climate refugees in that there's an island country. I cannot think of it, but there's an island country that is disappearing. And
Right,
the inhabitants of this island have to leave to
right,
exist, right? They're losing their
right.
entire nation to to climate
Well,
change.
all of these other floods, like in Pakistan, all those floods that they were
Exactly.
having, like
But we don't think about it
it's
insularly enough, I don't think. And we're going to be seeing those similar kind of climate refugees just within our own country or continent, because I gotta include Canada in that too, right? So how does all of that and everything you experienced on this trip possibly frame your work moving forward?
I have been interested in climate change for a while, and maybe not as much as I could be, but I've been thinking about it a lot. It really informs a lot of just my personal work and in terms of like how I recycle things or what I will purchase in terms of how long they're like the shelf life they're going to have after I've done this single use thing. I'm really thinking about my footprint that way. And I know like I have big gaps in what is like best practices and what I do. And then I'll make certain allowance. Like if they told me the clay that I use, the clay spray I use for my hair is going to kill the climate, I'm sorry, climate. We're using the clay spray. Like yeah, that's like you have to draw your lines, right?
Yeah.
So I have a very fluid line, I guess. But I've been just very conscious of the climate and it's like if I've got any great works in me left, I really want to do good. I really want to be of service. I want to be helpful. And I know that I'm not a scientist. I know I'm not, you know, I know I'm not an artist where it's like that work is so compelling that, it's so arresting you have to look at it. I'm not that kind of a person. But I do have a quiet burn and I do have a way of speaking, maybe not so much speaking, but I have a voice. And I feel like my voice is interesting enough that maybe it can help some people, and I don't know how many people it will be, but I just know that if I don't try, I'm going to be very unsatisfied. I feel like I have a purpose, and whatever that purpose is, uh, it's not just to be insular anymore. It needs to be out there and it needs to be helpful. And it's with the skills that I have now and the interests that I have. So
What I hear is, as a journalist, you feel a responsibility to tell stories. It's not
yeah,
just a passion. It's not something we were born into. It's something we feel a responsibility to do to improve the lives of other people around us. You agree?
yeah, I agree. I mean, I've done a lot of frivolous things in my life. I covered the entertainment industry for a lot of years. So
I
like
was a
if you want to
sports
talk
writer
about
for 13
frivolity,
years. There's not much more
yeah,
frivolous than that.
yeah. So okay, we've done some frivolous things, but also we acquired the skills along the way.
Yeah.
Like Like it gave us a certain perspective. And my whole thing is like, I'm interested in the truth. I am not interested in whitewashing something. I'm not interested. I want things to be said. I want, I don't know. It's like I want things to be like so people can see them. I don't like I love mysteries of the universe, but at the same time, like I need things to be seen. The things that need to be seen. And I feel like as a human, I can help people see things,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I guess. And the journalism, I don't know. It's like, who would think like in your teens, you would be freaking interested in journalism and like it never really leaves you. Like it gets in you and it never really leaves you.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I'm not practicing journalism, like I'm a really good researcher. Like there's a lot of things connected to journalism that I'm really good at that I've been doing, even if it's like anybody in my family says like, oh, we need this research. They just automatically give it to me because I'm like, ooh, I feel like I can find anything. I really felt that. I really felt that that's funny. When I was a television producer, I was also for a very brief time. I worked for a private investigator, and it's like I can find anything. I can find anything,
Mm-hmm. I
and
feel
I
the same
will
way.
not let go of it until I find it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to make it interesting. I'm going to make it entertaining. I'm going to make it funny. I'm going to make it sad and emotional. I'm going to put in everything I can into these stories that come out of it. And hopefully, you know, that will resonate with some people.
Yeah.
And that they'll see it, not pounding people over the head with it, but just like it's entertaining enough and you're gonna learn something. You know, my book publisher said he would introduce me to the most powerful agent he knew.
There you go.
I'm trying to put together, I've only been home a week, so I want to put together a book proposal, but I also want to write the main story. And I've gotten a little interest in some places that I've talked to. Um, but I also feel like basically you just need to write it. You can't really waste the time because this is still a hot, fresh story. It still happened this month.
Mm-hmm.
So start writing it, get that part out of it, just start launch that. Even if I do it through medium.com or Substack, I think I'm going to do Medium. Even if I do them through those channels, at least pushing that out into the world will at least I can point to it, right?
You could turn
It's
it
one of
into a
those things like you
series.
point.
It doesn't have to be one
Yeah.
succinct article. It,
Yeah. No, I was thinking of that, but I feel like, oh gosh, I probably have to do it all.
that
But
might
I
be too
feel
much
like it's
time.
just too, it would be in parts. It would be in
Yeah.
parts, but I feel like I would have to write it all for it to be in parts.
Mm.
But I don't know. It's like when I came home, my brain was so stuffed with this whole experience that I needed to either have the experience shrink a little or my brain grow a little bit so that there was some room for me to find where the story really was. Because
Mm.
and I feel like I'm still like right in where is this story? I started writing it and I'm like, where is this story? Where like how do you want this? And that's what I'm,
How
doing
do you
now.
want it to change the world?
I don't know that I want to change it to the world. I just want it to be a piece that that can be looked at, um, and to maybe hit people personally that they can relate to it, and understand what we're doing to our world. And I mean, if you could get it's political. It's political to a large degree. It's political. And if we don't start saying something about our environment and how we're treating our environment and the things that we're doing to upset this earth, the earth will go on. but we may not go on.
Yeah.
Humanity may not go on. Animals may not go on. Life may not go on. It can be a rock just like Mars, you know? Everything in the universe has energy, and a dead planet still has energy. So if that's what you want, your dead planet, you can continue on, you know, because you're going to get that. That's what you're going to get. So, I mean, there was this one movie. It was a great movie, but it never left my mind. It was I think it's called The Day After Tomorrow. It was with Jake Gyllenhaal and Celia Ward, and it had what's his name? Dennis Quaid. And it was about how Dennis Quaid is this research scientist, and then he's like, you find some things that are happening in a very cold, icy place, and he realizes how fast the climate is changing, and it's like the climate started changing so fast and so erratic and with such force. There were tornadoes in Los Angeles. There was like waves of, frozen stuff coming in from, and water, and just a tremendous amount of water. And the climate, people were fleeing to Mexico, who wouldn't let the United States Americans over their border as climate refugees because we've treated them so abominably, in the past. So this movie was like, oh, wow, what a bunch of fiction. Oh my God, now I feel like it was a documentary. Now I feel like it was a documentary. And that's what I want people, like, our planet is on fire. It is on literal fire. What do you do when you have a fire? It's an emergency. And that's what I want people to know. We're in an emergency. That frog in the water where the water just keeps getting hotter and hotter, but they don't notice it because it's just been a gradual, they plunge anything else in it and it would burn it. That's what we're in now. That's what we're in. We are in trouble.
Amazing.
That's what I want people to know. And you can do what you can to change. There's so many organizations now that I mean, we need to collectively use our voice. We just to stop things. Like, we have that power. We have that power, and we don't use that power. But that's how things change. That's how things change, is that we use our voice. And you may be one voice at the beginning, but it grows. So I want to be another voice in there. And
that's amazing. Diana, thank you
so that's the journey.
This story. It's been amazing chatting with you.
Well, it's been amazing chatting with you. Thank you for giving me this space to just be blah, blah.
I love that Diana's experience sparked a deeper reflection for herself on the urgent need to address climate change, and that she's taking action to inform others. That's the heart of a journalist right there. Many of us in the pet photography world are using or creating personal projects that intend to raise awareness and inspire action. I hope to bring you more stories of pet photographers around the world who are using their cameras to inform. If you are one, or if you know one, send me an email at angela@bigwhitedogphotography.com and tell me how you're changing the world. Thanks for joining us at the Companions Collective. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with a friend or two. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you could leave us a review or rating on your podcast platform. Until next week, tell your dog I said hi.